Walking along a quiet residential street in Dawlish, I came across this. It looks rather like a level crossing gate. And a closer look at the sloping garden reveals a collection of Western Region-style totem signs and a narrow-gauge funicular railway track with rails 1 foot 11.5 inches apart. A small wagon moves up and down the line on a cable driven by an electric motor. It's named after the broad-gauge locomotive Tiny and carries a Newton Abbot shed plate. It's taken railway engineer Alan Pine at least 20 years to build this 150-yard-long line. It has a gradient of 1 in 4, and he had to dig out 150 tonnes of earth by hand to lay the tracks. If the Second World War hadn't intervened, Allen's railway wouldn't have been the only one running through this housing estate. From the summit of his line you can see across the town to where the Great Western Railway planned to build a line avoiding the sea wall. In the 1930s, the need for a new line between Dawlish, Warren and Teignmouth had been highlighted by 2 recent incidents. The first happened on Christmas Eve 1929, when waves blown in by a storm damaged the down line here between Dawlish and Dawlish Warren. The second was 2 years later, when there was a major landslip here at Spray Point near Teignmouth. This film is about the shorter of 3 proposed deviations around the sea wall. Conceived in 1937, it would have started just east of Newton Abbot near the Hackney Marshes. A new bridge would have been built just north of this one on the road to the Passage House Inn. The deviated line would run to a point just north of Dawlish Warren, a total of 8 miles 61 chains at a cost of £3 million. It would have gone slightly to the north of the existing route. As well as addressing worries about the sea wall, the new line would have increased capacity and reduced delays caused by some trains having to stop twice at each station as they had so many carriages. Funding was to come from the government, who were keen to alleviate unemployment following the Great Depression. Gradually gaining height on an embankment, it would pass just south of Ware Barton and through ground now occupied by the Jack's Patch Garden Centre, between the existing line and the white houses in the distance here, which lie on the A379 road at Bishop's Tainton. This project was one of the last to be considered by the Great Western Railway in the 30s. They'd already used government money to divert around Westbury and Frome. The new line would have crossed the A379 road here on a 3-arch bridge and entered the first of 4 tunnels. It was to be 215 yards long and take the railway under the lee. The line would have emerged from the tunnel, passing north of Morrison's supermarket and crossing the valley on an 80-foot high embankment before entering another tunnel, this one 234 yards long. This would take the line under Mill Lane. The proposed Dawlish deviation line would then have crossed the valley on a bridge between Higher and Lower Coombe Farms. This is roughly where the new Teignmouth station would have been. Nearby, Rock Lane would have been diverted to make way for the embankment and a 100-foot deep cutting as the line entered the third and the longest tunnel near the present-day Lake Avenue. This third tunnel was 2,624 yards long. That's more than 1.5 miles in length under Exeter Road and Holcombe Down. At one point it was 466 feet underground. It would have emerged here, south of Aller Farm in Dawlish. The new tracks would then have come across this field on an embankment, across this lane by the ford at the bottom of Aller Farm Road, and then followed Aller Valley Road from here across the fields towards Dawlish, where it would have gone north of the church across the New Hay. Much of this green space would have been lost. The railway was going across here on a 130-yard-long sandstone viaduct 60 feet above the ground. The Great Western Railway bought many houses in the area, and they too were going to be lost if the route was built. It was going to cross Weech Road here, on a bridge 15 feet high with a 20-foot span, just west of Bridge House. Then it would have crossed Bad Lake Hill on a similar structure. Some of these houses here would have been demolished. A new Dawlish station would have been built here. At the junction of Meadow Rise and Longlands, the line would have entered its fourth and final tunnel, 586 yards long. It would have emerged here, behind this supermarket. The line would then have continued north-east past Gatehouse Farm. It would then have crossed Exeter Road here, on a bridge 35 feet wide and 16 feet high. From here, the line, which had a ruling gradient of 1 in 150, would have crossed land now occupied by holiday caravans, emerging here in Dawlish Warren. It crossed the road on a 16-foot-high bridge with a 20-foot span. It would then have gone through land again occupied by more holiday caravans to rejoin the main line again here at Easton, just south of milepost 203.5. The idea of a junction here at Easton was abandoned in 1936 after the sea wall was breached at Star Cross. A new idea was conceived, having a junction here at Powderham, near the Sailing Club. This idea was also abandoned a year later in favour of ending the route at Exminster. Each one of the two alternatives would have started in Newton Abbot and followed the same route as far as Dawlish, but would have crossed Weech Road here by the vicarage, entering a tunnel under Bad Lake Hill. The Great Western Railway bought the vicarage and later used it as staff accommodation. From Dawlish, the deviation to Exminster went through Kenton and Powderham and ended up here, between the Exminster station buildings and the Swan's Nest pub, then called the Railway Inn. The actual junction of the deviation was down there in the distance by the footbridge. The whole project was abandoned after World War II on cost grounds in 1949, only to re-emerge in 2014 when the line was dramatically breached at Dawlish in a storm.